Film footage of the advance of the American ground troops toward the towers of the cathedral. For decades, they have shaped our image of the liberation of Cologne on the left side of the Rhine. But if one looks into the history behind the film images and photographs and researches for eyewitnesses and reports, one obtains results that scarcely seem possible, and there seem to be as many different versions of the sequence of events as there are eyewitnesses. The often astounding results frequently shed a completely new light on the most well-known film scenes. This also raises the question of the credibility of the images. Do the images really show what we think we see, or do they offer an illusion of reality?
Wanted the chance MG offered them to earn their
In the days after the capture of Cologne, American cameramen take several hours of film material on the work of the new military government. In order to report as comprehensively as possible, the news images are systematically and professionally created. Many of the actions portrayed, even trials or arrests, are staged.
The sentence hard. Germans convicted in the courts were sent here, the grimmest building in the city. This is Klingelputz, the forbidding former Gestapo prison and torture house.
This scene is purported to show the internment of captured Nazis.
But as MG's prisoners climbed down in front of Klingelputz, suddenly the immensity of MG's job in this or any German city is symbolized by another prisoner, a cocky little Aryan Superman.
One of the prisoners is resistant. A brief scuffle ensues. If one looks at the raw footage of this in the National Archive in Washington, one discovers that this scene was filmed twice. The men, who seem to be alleged Nazi criminals to the observer, are apparently simply actors, who were hired for the action for the U.S. cameras in order to film scene by scene, as in a feature film.
He was still a Nazi? He always would be. Suppose MG hadn't caught him and kicked him into jail.
For leading American historians of cinematography, there is no better institute than London's Imperial War Museum. After close examination of the documents, the IWM and the head of the Film, Photo and Video Archive, Roger Smither, agrees to an interview.
We have many examples throughout our archive where you can almost, in many cases the film is silent, but you almost feel that you can hear the dialogue between the people behind the camera and the people in front of the camera, so that the cameraman is maybe saying, wait a minute, don't start yet, do it again. And the person in front of the camera is saying, was that okay? Shall I do it again? Should I lean further forward? It's always possible to come up with examples like this.
Might this also be true for footage of fighting from Cologne? Let's take a look at a few scenes that were filmed by the cameramen Bates, Rosenman, and Gerl in the inner city of Cologne. At noon on March 6, 1945, Gerl is filming at the Roman Tower. According to the documents of the 3rd Armored Division, this is the route of F Company of the 32nd Tank Regiment. But the tank advancing here bears the designation E on its rear, meaning that it belongs to E Company, the unit of Clarence Smoyer, who was actually deployed at Gustavstrasse at this time.
Following the fighting to the shadows of the ancient cathedral, Signal Corps cameramen, Sergeants Rosenman, Bates, and Garrow record the climactic tank battle for the city.
Garrow films directly behind the tank. Here, one actually has the impression that the footage showed soldiers during a battle. But as the tank drives past the Roman Tower, one can see that other GIs are already there, and 3 of them are talking casually and disinterestedly on the edge of the road. It looks as though they're wondering why a GI is walking past them at a rapid pace. The tank has driven on. Now one can see the aforementioned infantrymen at the Roman Tower. One of them runs past the Roman Tower, firing his rifle continuously. Why he is shooting is unclear, but where he is going is not. 50 meters away, there is a group of GIs standing next to a kiosk. They were already standing there when the tank drove through the image. They are obviously not seeking cover, neither from any bullets from their advancing comrade, nor from the German side. One could at least speculate that this scene would have looked differently had they been in real danger. Although the tank has just skirted along the wall of the house, the unprotected infantrymen are walking upright and in the middle of the street. The impression of a later shoot grows stronger. While the soldier walks through the image firing continuously, another soldier looks amused and turns around. The cameraman Gerl, who wants to document war events, cannot have been happy with this expression of levity. Apparently, the laughing GI is immediately made aware of this because his smile freezes again, and it looks as though he turns around to wave back the soldier who just walked past him. Shortly afterward, a scene appears in the raw footage of Gerl, which was probably filmed before the courthouse at Appellhofplatz. A Sherman tank takes a shortcut through a curve, rams into a street lamp, and gets stuck. At this moment, an applauding GI jumps into the cameraman's image. Even if these details don't prove anything, they are at least unusual when viewed in the light of acute danger. The limited perspective of the camera's objective lens is supported by the perception of eyewitnesses and participants. In the afternoon, Voigt Gerl films the gruesome images of the destruction of the Sherman tank in the presence of numerous photographers on Komödienstraße. There are also different descriptions of this. Stars and Stripes reporter Andy Rooney says in his memoirs that when he heard the shot, he ran into the open and saw the wounded commander, who was not able to free himself from the hatchway. Two men then climbed onto the turret, pulled him out, and helped them down.
Well, my memory of the war fades, and you tend to get, maybe you invent the story sometimes, you think you saw it, but I have a few things in my mind that are very clear, and my entry into Cologne is one of the things I really remember clearly about the war. And I remember that first American tank being hit. I remember the officer climbing out of the tank and losing his leg, and all this is clear to me, but I would be hard-pressed to swear by the details.
Andy Rooney does not want to discuss why this looks different in Gerl's film footage. Here, the soldier is able to free himself from the hatchway and roll onto the rear of the tank with great dexterity. Reporter Mike Levin, who also reported correctly in the Bartelbord case, also gave the name of the man in 1945 who was said to have helped the injured commander, Oliver Griffin, a bricklayer from North Carolina. Oliver Griffin's daughter, Kathy, tells me, yes, it is true. Her father helped the commander and was also wounded himself during the battle. He is also familiar with the famous photo, but always said anytime he saw it somewhere later, yes, that is the tank, but I always wondered how they took the picture because that is not me in the photo.
I agree that it's a very beautifully composed photograph. It's quite difficult to believe that it is a photographer just reacting very quickly to a momentary opportunity. It's the framing, the focus, everything is just so. And even the two figures on the left who are running it's all too good to be true. And it's either an extraordinary response to an opportunity or it's a stage scene. But I have to say it does bother me. I'm struggling to think of examples of stage scenes where the outlook is so bad.
The work of the cameraman Voigt Gerl, who filmed the event, was difficult to find, as Gerl was married 6 times, living alone and secluded at the end of his life. But he spoke to one of his stepsons about his experiences in Cologne, and he kept a series of photos and left a few comments on the backs of them under the title, "The Shell of Cologne." As the German tank burns on the other side, Gerl is still on site on Komödienstraße, like the other correspondents.
The tank was burning brightly in the bluish haze of the cathedral. Working fast, we made several shots establishing the world-famous dome in the background. This was good stuff. But March the 6th was a day of fateful surprises. The final phase began as we were standing at the left front of the tank, and our performance was being watched by a non-appreciative audience over the sights of an enemy 88. This one was concealed in the shadows of the Hohenzollern Bridge, which was straight down the street and just beyond the cathedral. Then they let one go.
In his film footage, there is a scene that is similar to the described moment. It was filmed on Komödienstraße. There are already columns of smoke in the background where the German tank is located. The GI in the coat waves in the direction of the camera, as though he wants to call someone forwards, then walks upright and without cover forwards for a few steps and gestures with his arms in the direction of the German tank, as though he wants to call someone back. One does not have the impression that the officer fears being shot at from the direction of the German tank, nor does the soldier on the right side of the picture. Uninterested in the goings-on, he even looks away and turns his back on the scene. But by his own account, Voigt Gerl didn't only film on Komödienstraße. He also captures the German tank on film, meaning images as we know them from Bates. But his images came from the opposing south side. This film footage from Gerl's favorite corner has never been seen by anyone, however. It is considered lost. There was also no copy of this unknown film footage of the tank duel at the cathedral in Gerl's work. However, several U.S. reporters listed his name in 1945 as the cameraman who was supposed to have documented the tank duel at the cathedral. O&A correspondent Michael Levin also lists Voigt Gerl by name in his report as the sole cameraman and describes his story with the words,
Sergeant Voigt Gerl stood on the cathedral steps, sealing up the greatest pictures he had ever made.
Andy Rooney states in all reports for Stars and Stripes, Gerl's pictures of the German tank taken broadside are the actual, respectively the factual pictures of the shots which knocked out the lead tank. And Gerl's official discharge papers goes one step further, stating he filmed from a distance of 30 yards as the German crew climbed out of the burning tank. The cameraman only made a public declaration after the war regarding his experiences in Cologne, once in the form of a press release. In 1954, he is in the city once again for the Photokina trade fair as a media representative of the U.S. Army, an expert for modern photography. Gerl presents the press releases published by the U.S. Army under the title Return to Cologne, as the man who filmed the tank battle here in 1945.
Gerl, then an army combat cameraman, worked his way behind the German lines and made the widely publicized newsreel sequence involving a tank duel between American and German tanks. Roberts, Hawley and Gerl were the first Americans to reach the cathedral and the Rhine. In a hectic day, they captured 100 German soldiers and got the first picture story of a tank duel.
It would not surprise me to find out that you could have 30 or 40 correspondents there and they would all act as if they were the only one, as if the other 29 or 39 hadn't been there, because it makes their own story look that much more impressive.
Numerous sources report that not only Smoyer's crew took part in the attack, but also infantrymen with machine guns and possibly grenades or a bazooka. Gun tracers in the film footage of Bates also clearly show that the Panther is being shot at from numerous directions. But are there also indications of reenacted film scenes here? The next day, at the latest, the wreck of the tank at the cathedral becomes a pilgrimage destination for numerous correspondents and cameramen. The cameraman Bates also assembled people for a photo shoot. Men from the Pershing crew also come. Only tank gunner Clarence Smoyer is nowhere to be seen.
I don't know why I was never in those pictures. Yeah, I don't know. I wondered why. But Bates had told me that he had a photo session afterward, but I don't know why. I never remember hearing of that.
During the photo shoot at the cathedral, Clarence Smoyer is moving toward the Rhine when an artist addresses him and says he has instructions to draw a portrait of Smoyer.
The artist drawing my picture at Cologne, Marshall Thomas. His name was Marshall Thomas, and I never heard anything from him afterward. I don't know what branch. I assume he was part of the service, or maybe just correspondent too. I don't know.
It is suspicious that there are fuel cans on the ground next to the Panther. It would not have been unusual for the cameraman to have taken the unique opportunity to film supplementary footage of the burning vehicle. The German tank commander Gottfried, whose tank was knocked out behind the cathedral on March 6th, also reported such film footage. Even Gottfried, who hid during the 2 subsequent nights, apparently knew that the Americans had reenacted fighting on a large scale for the film cameras, as he said. This might explain why the drama is missing from many images, which one would otherwise expect during combat. For example, when Leon Rosenmann films Smoyer's advancing tank from a distance, one can see a soldier on the left side of the image, who is walking in a noticeably relaxed manner in the direction of the street through which the Pershing is advancing. It appears this man is unarmed. He is not using the wall of the building as cover, but is walking in the middle of the street. Even the shot of the mighty gun seems to be no reason for him to flinch even slightly. There is a great difference between the literal calmness that many film images show and the personal perspective of the commanders of the American battle group that was deployed at the cathedral. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford L. Miller associates Cologne with his most bitter memories of the war. It was the deployment of the Pershing at the cathedral that brought the decisive turning point. In a personal letter to Smoyer, he writes,
"What you and the rest of the world do not know is that knocking out that Panther gave me the opportunity to go back to the brass and tell them I was putting my plan of action into effect and would not continue with theirs."
Miller's letter to Smoyer bears clear signs of a justification letter. According to him, the officers' corps is partially complicit.
He said after the incident in Cologne, he would fight the war his own way. That he before that, he was fighting or doing things the way they gave him orders to do, but afterward he thought he was going to go his own way, do it his way.
According to the records of the 3rd Armored Division, however, Miller had been acting according to his own ideas since noon. The plan for the fast thrust of a special force, which ended so abruptly on Komödienstrasse, was also conducted under his command. Of all things, a highly risky push of the Pershing tank was to give Miller the opportunity to convince the officers of another new plan?
I don't fully understand that either, except maybe they tried to avoid going right head to head with the Germans. I always took it that way, that maybe before they tried to evade, come from the side or whatever, but not go right into it. I'm not sure of what he meant by that.
I have never told the story of Cologne from my perspective, and most likely never shall. if I told you I would get court-martialed.
The fact that the professional soldier Miller is serious about the court-martial becomes clear in the following sentence.
Please respect that feeling and guard it in any conversations you may have.
A couple of remaining Wehrmacht soldiers ruined the triumph of the GIs in the last few meters, and thus also hit on a weak point of the U.S. Army. The U.S. tanks were still technically inferior to the German tanks. Pershing Commander Robert Early announces it on the front page of the Army newspaper Stars and Stripes on March 8th.
Everybody is proud of their units and proud of their record advances, but when they talk about their tanks, it is different. Tell them at home our tanks are not worth a drop of water on a hot stone.
Business and policy are already being made in the USA with the news from Cologne. On the day after Robert Early's outburst in the press on March 8th, Stars and Stripes publishes an article with the title, "Washington Decides to Construct New Heavy Tanks for the War in Germany." The crisis of the U.S. tanks had long since expanded into a crisis of politics. The order to end the tank crisis is now received by Ford and General Motors, who are incidentally good customers of North America's largest producer of commercials, Alexander Films, the longtime employer of James Bates before and after the war.
The Germans just saw it really going to live.
All in all, sufficient reason for a film propaganda piece in which the T-26 defeats the previously superior German tank in a heroic finale.
Is found and the T-26 hits its mark.
T-26 tanks prepares to fire.
For the people at home and the morale of the troops, this is good news. But the many cross-connections to the weapons project create the impression that the weapons industry could have had an interest in their new product, making a good impression in front of the cathedral in Cologne. With this in mind, James Bates cut and arranged his cameraman edit in 1946 with the film scenes of the cathedral. In the opinion of the British cameraman Robert Ziller, the American film unit would definitely have had the technical capabilities to completely stage such a shooting after the fact.
I would say it's possible. It's possible that they did it again the next day, sure. They had the means. Yeah.
The theory that I advanced several years ago, that one could prove just by comparing the images and film scenes that certain scenes had been staged, has not been confirmed. In this respect, they remain indications that cast doubt on the authenticity of the footage. The team of experts in the film department of the Imperial War Museum is divided on the issue. The authenticity of the footage is particularly bolstered by the shaky camera work, two employees believe. But the department director, Roger Smither, is skeptical about one thing.
My own reasons for being, if you like, suspicious about this scene, from the British perspective, I would say that it would be very unusual to have such a strong concentration of cameras in one place, and even more surprising that they should all be running and in focus and prepared at exactly the same time. And this would certainly seem more than a little suspicious to me.
James Bates was sent with the completed film material to Paris to the headquarters of the Allies. Simultaneously, the press center of the Americans in continental Europe.
They took me back to Paris as kind of a rally, more or less. Everybody was kind of celebrating because of what they had done. The negative was processed, it was edited down. The soundtrack was done in Paris immediately. The sequence of the concussion from that 90 millimeter gun and the cuts compensator on it was so tremendous that it blew me off of the, I couldn't use a tripod, of course. I had to handhold it, and it would blow me off of my picture, and I'd have to get back on it again. But they had blow-ups in Paris of the armor-piercing shell going through the tank. They had made copies of the original negative.
Only one cut probably left the press center after this was released by the censor department of the High Command of the U.S. Army in Europe. If one tries to combine the various reports and information into an overall picture, there are many indications that the German tank was simultaneously attacked and knocked out by several U.S. units. The fact that the Pershing tank was thrown into the battle in a highly risky solo action could be due to the intended propaganda promotion of this tank. I personally do not believe that even a very ambitious commander would have recklessly taken this risk of losing a Pershing on the steps of the cathedral. Even a diversionary maneuver with the aid of a captured German tank is possible, but it seems more likely to me that the German commander Bartelbort and tank gunner Koenig could have been mistaken. The film scenes of the evacuating German crew are in all probability authentic. Other sequences, such as the burning combat vehicle, the firing Pershing on Marzellenstrasse or on Komödienstrasse, contain indications that they were subsequently filmed after the end of combat. The lost film footage of Gerl might have placed the lone role of the Pershing in question, and was therefore not taken into consideration during editing. However, it is also possible that Gerl preferred posing before a Panther over the stricken Sherman, and that the footage thought to have been lost may never have existed. Ultimately, the many discrepancies surrounding the end of fighting at the Cologne Cathedral will probably never be resolved. But it is not impossible that an eyewitness account may yet turn up, which will tell the story from a completely different perspective. James Bates, Leon Rosenmann, and Clarence Voigt Gerl, and the many other photographers of that day, will provide the first-class images for these stories and for this film.